One of the themes that the International Manifesto Group pays a lot of attention to is the long battle between imperialism and anti-imperialism. And it has been particularly good at pointing out the fact that the hold of imperialism on the world order is slipping. We saw this so graphically recently in Afghanistan, and the events as they unfolded in Afghanistan, as the US lost its control over the puppet regime it had created and the puppet army that it had been funding to such a great degree. All of these events also reminded us that the United States, which began playing a critically important part in the exercise of imperialism since the early 20th century and began leading the effort since the end of the Second Cold War, has never actually won a single war. We are also seeing that grip slipping today in the US-Russia confrontation over Ukraine. The US is keeping up an extremely dangerous, shrill, and high decibel rhetoric of against Russia, accompanying it with all sorts of hypocritical words about democracy and human rights. It is sending troops and nuclear-capable bombers and warships to the region. It is making threatening noises about what it will do if Russia does this or that. However, as we all know, Russia has insisted repeatedly it has no intention of invading any country. Even the present Ukrainian government, which like all those after 2014 is usually eager to run and hide in the skirts of the imperialist powers, particularly the United States, is actually asking the United States to stop creating such a dangerous situation. The NATO alliance is visibly crumbling as various European leaders go visiting President Putin on their own, presumably making sure that their national interests are secured. And even some of the post-communist countries which belong to NATO and tend to be extremely anti-Russia have been breaking ranks with NATO on this matter. Still, the crisis is kept going, and every hour the crisis is kept going, it increases the risk of war through miscalculation or desperation. What all this shows us is that a declining imperialism is not necessarily less dangerous. Indeed, it may get more so as it gets more incoherent and more desperate. The long story of the battle between imperialism and its opponents is certainly in a critically important phase. And the Iranian Revolution of 1979 was a very important milestone in this battle, a very important part of the gains made by anti-imperialist forces. It upended the American order in the Middle East. And for the next many decades, the absorption of the United States in the Middle East region gave other parts of the world, particularly Latin America, some breathing room. And as we know, one of the major results of that was that it gave room for progressive developments to emerge, particularly the development we know as the pink tide, the election of a series of left of center governments, some more radical than others, of course, in the Latin American region. By fighting their battle against imperialism, Iranians have paid a heavy price for their defiance of imperialist designs. However, we also know that their efforts have not been in vain. Today, we see with greater clarity than ever before that an anti-imperialist alliance is being formed with Iran and Russia, of course, but also, with China and Russia, of course, but also important other countries like Iran, like Venezuela, like Cuba. And these are acting together increasingly against imperialism. And as imperialism is losing its coherence, they are gaining theirs. And so among these alliances is the increasing closeness and cooperation between Iran, which came out against imperialism, as we know, in '79, and Cuba, which had been fighting that fight from 2 decades earlier. So welcome again to Iran and Cuba Promoting Pluripolarity, which is also the international book launch of the Farsi translation of Cuba-US relations. I should like to add that while I'm delighted to host this and I'm eager to listen to our excellent group of speakers, most of the organization of this event was done by Arnold August. So a big thank you to you, Arnold.